Hey viewers! Back when I was a little kid, and even still today, I loved playing two-player games on the Sega Genesis with friends. One of those games that I remember quite fondly is NBA Jam. I've always liked basketball, and every season I try to catch the Spurs games. It's an awesome sport, and in my humblest opinion, this game is a love letter to it. So let's take a look at why I think this title is so cool. The game was developed by Midway Entertainment and produced by Acclaim. It was also released in mid-1993 for arcades and early 1994 for consoles. The development history is pretty interesting. After the release of the shoot-'em-up Total Carnage, lead designer of that game, Mark Turmel, aka This Guy, wanted to make a game that would appeal to a much wider audience. Midway saw minor success with the basketball game Arch Rivals, and Mr. Turmel decided to use that as the basis for his next venture. Another Midway title that caught Mr. Turmel's attention was Mortal Kombat. He and his team saw the potential in using digitized actors and graphics, much in the same way MK did. Things got even better for the devs because the then president of Midway, Neil Nicastro, saw a lot of potential in the project and decided to help things along by going to the NBA directly and tried to procure a license deal. Initially, the NBA was skeptical of an arcade game using their athletes and team names, but they eventually relinquished and the license deal went through. And the rest, as they say, is history. Most of you viewers have noticed that I'm not really playing the base NBA Jam game. Instead, I opted for the Tournament Edition version for this review. And the reason behind that is because whilst the base game is still great, Tournament Edition has more stuff, and to me personally, that makes a lot of difference. For instance, this version includes an updated roster, new music, and hidden characters. So yeah, this is what I would call the definitive version. Anyway, as I mentioned before, NBA Jam used both licensed teams as well as real player names. Now today, that's done quite often, but back in the former half of the 90s, not so much. It was a big deal during that era to have actual NBA teamsters competing against each other. If you're looking for a more realistic basketball game, you're better off with one of the older NBA Live titles, because NBA Jam is far from realistic. You got guys jumping impossible heights, the basketball itself catching on fire. You don't even get penalized for fouling another player. This game is very arcadey, and if you're into that kind of stuff, like me, then I can guarantee that you'll love NBA Jam. This is also a really easy game to get into, and I don't mean like the game is not challenging. I mean that NBA Jam is the kind of game that anyone can pick up and play, pretty much. Nothing is really made complicated, it's always a 2-on-2 match, so if you ever need to pass the ball, you only need to worry about where your teammate is at. Speaking of which, unless you're playing co-op with a friend, your teammate is partially controlled by the AI. You still control his speed and his tossing and passing, but the rest of his actions are done automatically. Also, the controls for this game are not complicated. The A button fakes jump shots and blocks, B makes you run faster, and C makes you pass the ball and swipe. Pretty easy to remember controls if you ask me. I should note that even though you can play as every team in the NBA, two of the teams, namely the Lakers and the Bulls, are quite overpowered. Granted, this strange rule only applies if you're playing as these teams, not if you're playing against them. Granted, I'm really not surprised that they made the Lakers and the Bulls so strong. NBA Jam was released during Scottie Pippen, BJ Armstrong, Tony Kukoc, Vlade Divac, Anthony Peeler, and Nick Van Exel's heydays. One other thing that I'd like to say about the gameplay is that there are cheat codes that extend the roster of each team. Not only are you given new NBA players, you're also given secret characters such as Will Smith and former President Bill Clinton. I love it when games do that. Little tongue-in-cheek stuff like that is what makes titles like this even more memorable. NBA Jam is one of the few games that I think that everyone should own. It's hella fun, not to mention hella addictive, and the best part is, you can own a copy on quite a few consoles. The game came out for the Genesis and Super NES, naturally, but the Sega CD, PS1, Saturn, 32X, and heck, even the Jaguar and PC got an NBA Jam release. All of these versions are great, but I would strongly suggest staying away from the Game Boy and Game Gear versions, because those versions suck. As for the score, I'm going to give NBA Jam a solid 9.5 out of 10. This is one of my favorite basketball video games, and heck, I'd say it's probably the best basketball game ever made. Boom shakalaka. Well, all you beautiful viewers out there, I hope you liked this video. If you did, then hit that like button and leave a comment. If you really, really like this video, then click on that subscribe and bell icons. Also, be sure to check out these other great videos from Dylan and Mike. These guys are the other 2/3 of what makes Tomazzi Entertainment so awesome. Later, viewers.